My 10-year-old grandson was taken to the hospital with kidney failure, and my daughter-in-law told me, "It's your duty to give him your kidney, you worthless woman." Until my grandson whispered, "Grandma, I'll tell you the truth about what's really killing me." Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. The phone rang at 6:37 in the morning, jolting me from the deepest sleep I'd had in weeks. My arthritis-worn fingers fumbled for the receiver on my nightstand, knocking over my water glass in the process. "Hazel? Hazel, you need to get to the hospital. Now." It was my son David's voice, but strained in a way I'd never heard before. My heart stopped. "What happened? Is Tyler okay?" "Just get here. Children's Hospital. 3rd floor." The line went dead. I threw on the first clothes I could find, yesterday's sweater and the jeans I'd left draped over my bedroom chair. My hands shook so badly I could barely tie my sneakers. Tyler. My 10-year-old grandson. The only light in my increasingly lonely world. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Every red light seemed to mock me. Every slow driver in front of me an obstacle between me and whatever terrible thing had happened to my baby. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, my mind racing through possibilities. An accident? A fall? Kids his age were always getting hurt playing sports or climbing trees, but something in David's voice told me this was different. Serious. I found parking after circling the lot twice, my old Honda struggling to fit into the tight spaces clearly designed for smaller cars. The walk from the parking garage to the hospital entrance felt like miles. My legs, already weak from 63 years of carrying me through life's disappointments, threatened to give out beneath me. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor was torture. A young couple stood beside me, the woman crying softly into her husband's shoulder. I wondered if they were facing the same nightmare I was walking into. The antiseptic smell of the hospital filled my nostrils, bringing back memories of my late husband's final days. Places like this never held good news for people like me. When the doors finally opened, I rushed toward the nurse's station. "I'm looking for Tyler Morrison. He's my grandson." The nurse, a kind-faced woman probably my daughter's age if I'd had a daughter, checked her computer. "Room 308. But you might want to check with the family first. There's quite a crowd in there." My stomach dropped. A crowd meant bad news. Really bad news. I walked down the hallway on unsteady legs, following the room numbers until I reached 308. Through the small window in the door, I could see David pacing back and forth, his usually neat hair disheveled. And there was Miranda, my daughter-in-law, sitting in a chair beside a hospital bed where I could barely make out Tyler's small form under white blankets. I pushed open the door quietly, not wanting to intrude on whatever medical discussion might be happening. But the moment I stepped inside, Miranda's head snapped up, her face twisting into an expression of pure venom. "You." The word came out like a curse. "You're finally here." "Miranda, I came as soon as David called." "What happened?" Is Tyler what?" She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Dying? Because that's what's happening, Hazel. Your grandson is dying and it's all your fault." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled backward, my hand reaching for the doorframe to steady myself. "What are you talking about?" "Kidney failure," David said quietly from the corner, not meeting my eyes. "Complete renal failure. The doctors say he needs a transplant immediately." I looked at the bed where Tyler lay unconscious, machines beeping around him, tubes and wires connecting his tiny body to various monitors. My sweet Tyler, who just last month had shown me his science project about butterflies, who still called me Grammy and hugged me tight every time I visited. "I don't understand," I whispered. "How did this happen?" "He was fine when I saw him 2 weeks ago." Miranda laughed, but there was no humor in it. Only bitter anger. "Fine? He's been sick for months, Hazel. Months. But you wouldn't know that because you're never around when we need you." That wasn't true. I visited every chance I got, but Miranda always had excuses. Tyler was busy with friends, or they had family plans, or he was doing homework. I'd started to think she didn't want me around at all. "The doctors say it's genetic," Miranda continued, her voice rising. "Something passed down through family lines. Something that skips generations sometimes." My blood ran cold. I thought about my own father, who died young of kidney disease back when medical care wasn't what it is today. I'd never known much about the details. My mother had been too devastated to talk about it. They're running tests, David added, still not looking at me, to see if any of us are compatible donors. Miranda stepped closer to me, her eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen before. And you know what the doctor told us, Hazel? He said the best chance for a match is usually a blood relative. Someone from the same genetic line. I nodded, not understanding where this was going but sensing something terrible approaching. You're his grandmother, Miranda hissed. You're the one who gave him whatever genetic curse is killing him. So you're going to fix it. Miranda, please, David said weakly, but she ignored him. You're 63 years old, Hazel. You've lived your life. You've had your chances. But Tyler? He's 10 years old. He has his whole life ahead of him. So you're going to march down to that lab right now and get tested. And when they tell us you're a match, you're going to give him your kidney. The room spun around me. I reached for the chair she'd been sitting in, needing something solid to hold on to. Miranda, I would do anything for Tyler. Anything. But kidney donation. At my age, I have health problems of my own. I don't care about your health problems, she screamed, her composure finally cracking completely. I don't care if you're tired or your back hurts, or you can't afford your medications anymore because you spent all your money on that worthless little apartment. Your grandson is dying, and it's your fault. That's enough, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Miranda wasn't finished. You were never there for David when he was growing up. Always working, always too busy, always making excuses. And now you're going to abandon Tyler too? Let him die because you're too selfish to save him. Every word was like a knife twisting in my chest. She was voicing every fear I'd carried for 35 years, every doubt about whether I'd been good enough as a single mother working 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. I'll get tested, I heard myself say. Of course I'll get tested. Miranda's expression didn't soften. If anything, she looked more disgusted. You'll get tested and you'll donate. It's your obligation. Your responsibility. You owe him that much after what you've done to this family. I wanted to ask what I'd done, what terrible crime I was being accused of. But Tyler stirred in his bed, making a small whimpering sound that broke my heart. I moved toward him instinctively, wanting to stroke his forehead like I used to when he was smaller. Don't touch him, Miranda snapped, stepping between us. You've done enough damage. The cruelty in her voice was like a slap across the face. I looked at my son, hoping for some support, some indication that he disagreed with his wife's harsh words. But David just stared at the floor, his jaw tight with what I assumed was grief and worry. I should go find a doctor, I said quietly. Ask about the testing process. Yes, you should, Miranda agreed coldly. And Hazel, don't even think about backing out. Tyler's life depends on you doing the right thing for once. I walked out of that room feeling like I was drowning. The hallway seemed endless, the fluorescent lights too bright, the sounds of the hospital too loud. I found a bathroom and locked myself inside, finally allowing the tears I'd been holding back to fall. Miranda's words echoed in my mind. Your fault. Your genetic curse. You owe him. Never there for David. Too selfish. Was she right? Had I failed so completely as a mother and grandmother that I was now responsible for Tyler's suffering? I stared at myself in the mirror above the sink. 63 years old, with gray hair I couldn't afford to color any more, in lines around my eyes that told the story of too many sleepless nights worrying about money, about David, about whether I was doing anything right. Could I really give Tyler my kidney? Would my body even survive such a major surgery at my age, with my high blood pressure and the arthritis that made every movement painful? But as I thought about Tyler's small face on that hospital pillow, so pale and still, I knew I had to try. Whatever Miranda thought of me, whatever failures I'd accumulated over the years, Tyler was innocent. He was everything good in my world. If my kidney could save him, then Miranda was right about one thing. I did owe him that much. Even if it killed me. The testing began that afternoon. Blood draws, urine samples, chest x-rays, and more medical procedures than I'd undergone in the past 5 years combined. Each needle prick felt like punishment for sins I wasn't even sure I'd committed. But Miranda's words had burrowed deep into my mind. This was my fault. Tyler's illness, his pain, his possible death. All because of something in my genes, something I'd unknowingly passed down to my family like a curse. Dr. Patricia Henley, the transplant coordinator, was a gentle woman in her 40s who spoke to me like I was a person rather than just a potential organ donor. She explained each test with patience I didn't feel I deserved. "Mrs. Morrison, I need to be honest with you about the risks," she said as we sat in her small office after the initial round of tests. "Kidney donation at your age, especially given your medical history, comes with significant complications. Your blood pressure isn't well controlled, and you mentioned chronic back pain. These factors could make surgery extremely dangerous." I nodded, staring at my hands folded in my lap. My wedding ring, which I'd never removed even 10 years after my husband's death, caught the fluorescent light. Frank would have known what to do. He always knew how to handle difficult situations, how to make the right choice when everything felt impossible. "Doctor, if I'm a match, what are Tyler's chances with my kidney?" "Excellent. Children tend to bounce back remarkably well from transplant surgery when they receive a kidney from a living donor, especially a blood relative. But Mrs. Morrison, your chances." She didn't need to finish. I could see it in her eyes, the same look I'd seen in doctors' faces when they'd talked about Frank's cancer. Compassionate but realistic. The kind of look that said she was already calculating my odds of surviving the operating table. "How long before we know if I'm compatible?" "The results should be available in 48 hours. In the meantime, I'd like you to think carefully about this decision. Discuss it with your family. Consider all your options." Options? As if I had any. As I walked back to Tyler's room, I could hear Miranda's voice before I even reached the door. "No, Mother Morrison, I don't think you understand the severity of the situation. Tyler could die waiting for a kidney from the donor list. Hazel is his best chance, and she's going to step up for once in her life." I paused outside the door, recognizing the voice on the other end of Miranda's phone call. Mother Morrison, that's what Miranda called Frank's mother, my former mother-in-law who lived 3 states away. At 86, she was too old to donate anything, but Miranda was clearly rallying support for her campaign to pressure me into surgery. "Yes, I know she's 63, but she's healthy enough. She works at that grocery store, doesn't she? If she can stand on her feet 8 hours a day scanning barcodes, she can handle surgery." The casual dismissal of my job, my physical struggles, my life. It all felt like another slap. I pushed open the door before I lost my nerve. Miranda quickly ended her phone call and looked up at me with an expression that might have been concern if I didn't know better. "How did the testing go?" "Fine. Results in 2 days." I moved toward Tyler's bed, where he lay sleeping. The machines continued their steady beeping, a rhythm that was becoming the soundtrack to my worst nightmare. "Good. The sooner we get this handled, the better." Miranda stood up and smoothed down her designer jeans. Even in a crisis, she looked perfectly put together. Her blonde hair styled just right, her makeup flawless despite spending the day in a hospital. It made me acutely aware of my own appearance. My bargain store sweater with a small stain near the hem, my gray roots showing through my home box-dye job, my sensible shoes that screamed, "Old lady on a budget." David entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee from the hospital cafeteria. He handed one to Miranda and looked at me questioningly. "I didn't know if you wanted any, Mom." The casual exclusion stung more than it should have. These small moments had been accumulating for years. Family photos I wasn't invited to be in, birthday parties I learned about after the fact, holidays where I was an afterthought rather than a welcome guest. "I'm fine," I said, settling into the uncomfortable chair beside Tyler's bed. My grandson looked so small under all those blankets, his face pale and drawn in a way that made my heart ache. I reached out to touch his hand but stopped myself, remembering Miranda's earlier warning about not touching him. "Mom," David said quietly, "Miranda and I have been talking about logistics. After the surgery, Tyler's going to need round-the-clock care during recovery. Miranda will handle most of it, but we thought maybe you could help out sometimes." "Help out? Not take care of your grandson, or be part of his recovery. Just help out like I was a hired babysitter rather than family." "Of course," I said. "Whatever he needs." Miranda made a small sound that might have been a scoff. "Well, we'll see how you're feeling after surgery. Recovery might be harder for you than for Tyler." The implication hung in the air. She expected me to donate my kidney and then disappear again, not burden them with my own needs or complications. I was useful for my organs but not much else. Miranda, David said with a warning tone, but she waved him off. I'm just being practical, David. Your mother isn't as young as she used to be. We need to be realistic about what she can and can't handle. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I need some air. The hospital's family garden was a small courtyard on the second floor, designed to give worried relatives a place to think and pray. I sat on a concrete bench surrounded by carefully maintained flowers and tried to remember the last time Tyler and I had spent time together without Miranda hovering nearby, controlling every interaction. It had been last Christmas, actually. David and Miranda had gone out to do some last-minute shopping, leaving me to watch Tyler for a few hours. We'd built a puzzle together. A 1,000-piece image of a mountain landscape that took us 3 hours to complete. Tyler had been patient and focused, carefully sorting pieces by color and edge, talking to me about school and his friends and his plans for the new year. Grammy, he'd said as we placed the final pieces, do you think Mom and Dad would let me spend a weekend at your apartment sometime? I've never seen where you live. The question had broken my heart because I knew the answer. Miranda would never allow it. She'd cited concerns about my neighborhood, my lack of space, my inability to properly supervise a child. All valid-sounding excuses that boiled down to one truth. She didn't trust me with her son. But Tyler had been interested. He'd asked about my neighbors, about whether I had any pets, about what we could do together. For those few hours, I'd felt like a real grandmother instead of an obligation. Now, sitting in this sterile garden, I wondered if that Christmas afternoon would be our last happy memory together. If I didn't survive the surgery, Tyler would grow up with only Miranda's version of who I was. The negligent mother, the absent grandmother, the woman who'd passed down a genetic death sentence. My phone buzzed with a text message. I fumbled for my reading glasses and squinted at the screen. It was from my neighbor, Mrs. Chun, who'd been picking up my mail while I stayed at the hospital. Hazel, there's a notice from your landlord. Rent increase. Looks urgent. Call me when you can. A rent increase. Of course. Because a dying grandson and potential kidney surgery weren't enough stress for 1 week. I calculated quickly in my head my Social Security, my part-time wages from the grocery store, my meager savings account. Even without a rent increase, I was barely scraping by. With one, I'd have to choose between keeping my apartment and buying my medications. But what did it matter now? If I donated my kidney to Tyler, I'd be facing months of recovery, unable to work. Even if I survived the surgery, I'd probably lose my job, my apartment, everything I worked so hard to maintain. The thought should have terrified me, but instead I felt a strange sense of relief. Maybe this was my purpose. Maybe this was why I'd struggled for so many years, why I'd sacrificed and scraped and endured Miranda's contempt. Maybe it was all leading to this moment when I could finally do something that mattered. My phone rang, jarring me from my thoughts. The caller ID showed David's number. Mom? Where are you? The doctor wants to talk to us about Tyler's treatment plan. I'm coming, I said, standing up from the bench with joints that protested every movement. As I walked back toward Tyler's room, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of a window. An old woman in cheap clothes, with worried eyes and shoulders bent from carrying too much weight for too long. But maybe, just maybe, I was about to do something that would make all those years of struggle worthwhile. Even if it killed me, at least Tyler would live. And maybe that was enough redemption for one lifetime. The call came at 7:15 on Thursday morning, 2 days after my testing. I'd been awake for hours anyway, staring at the ceiling of the uncomfortable hospital recliner chair I'd been sleeping in beside Tyler's bed. Miranda had gone home each night to shower and change, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. Every time Tyler stirred or made a sound, I needed to be there. Dr. Henley's voice was gentle but professional. Mrs. Morrison, could you meet me in my office? I have your test results. My stomach dropped. Something in her tone told me this wasn't the conversation I'd been hoping for. I glanced at Tyler, who was awake but groggy from the medications. His eyes, usually so bright and full of mischief, looked dull and tired. Grammy, he whispered. Where are you going? Just to talk to the doctor, sweetheart. I'll be right back. Miranda looked up from her phone, immediately alert. What did she want? Test results, I said simply, not trusting my voice to say more. I'm coming with you. She was already standing, grabbing her purse. "Miranda, maybe we should let Mom handle this first," David said from the corner where he'd been reading medical pamphlets about kidney disease. He looked as exhausted as I felt, his usually neat appearance disheveled from days of worry. "No," Miranda said firmly. "This affects all of us. Tyler's my son, and I have a right to know what's happening." Dr. Henley's office felt smaller with 3 of us crowded into the chairs facing her desk. She had my file open in front of her, pages of test results and medical jargon that might as well have been written in a foreign language. "Mrs. Morrison," she began, looking directly at me, "I'm afraid the compatibility testing shows that you're not a suitable donor for Tyler." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not suitable. After everything Miranda had said about my obligation, my responsibility, my genetic guilt, I couldn't even fulfill the one thing that might have redeemed me. "What do you mean, not suitable?" Miranda's voice was sharp, demanding. "She's his grandmother. Blood relative. You said that was the best chance for a match." Dr. Henley turned to Miranda with the patient expression of someone who'd had this conversation many times before. "Blood relationship increases the likelihood of compatibility, but it doesn't guarantee it. Mrs. Morrison's tissue markers aren't a close enough match to Tyler's. But more importantly, her current health status makes her ineligible for donation." "What health status?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Your blood pressure is significantly elevated, even with medication. Your kidney function, while not critical, shows signs of age-related decline. Your bone density scan indicates osteoporosis that's more advanced than typical for your age. Most concerning, your cardiac stress test showed irregularities that suggest underlying heart disease." Each diagnosis felt like another nail in my coffin. I'd known I wasn't as healthy as I used to be, but hearing it laid out so clinically made it real in a way that terrified me. "So fix it," Miranda snapped. "Give her better blood pressure medication. Put her on a diet. Do whatever you have to do to make her eligible." "Mrs. Morrison," Dr. Henley said, her tone becoming more firm, "even if we could address some of these issues, which would take months of treatment, the combination of factors makes donation extremely dangerous for your mother-in-law. The risk of surgical complications, including death, would be unacceptably high." "Unacceptable to who?" Miranda stood up, her face flushing with anger. "My son is dying. Hazel is his grandmother. If there's even a chance she could save him, shouldn't that be her choice to make?" "Miranda, please," David said quietly, but she ignored him. "No, David. I won't sit here and let them give up on Tyler because your mother is too old and sick to help her own grandson." The cruelty of her words stung, but what hurt more was the grain of truth in them. I was too old, too sick, too broken down to be of any use to anyone. Tyler needed a hero, and all he had was me. "Are there other options?" I asked Dr. Henley, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course. We'll test David and Miranda for compatibility. We also have Tyler on the national transplant list. Children receive priority, so his wait time should be relatively short." "How short?" Miranda demanded. "It's difficult to predict exactly, but given Tyler's age and blood type, I'd estimate anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. 2 years. Miranda's voice rose to nearly a shriek. "He could be dead in 2 years. Look at him. He's getting worse every day." She wasn't wrong. In the 3 days since I'd arrived at the hospital, Tyler had grown noticeably weaker. The dialysis treatments were helping, but they were also exhausting for his small body. The bright, energetic boy who'd been showing me butterfly facts just weeks ago was fading before our eyes. "The dialysis will keep him stable while we search for a donor," Dr. Henley assured us. "And as I said, we'll test immediate family members first." Miranda sat back down heavily, her anger deflating into something that looked almost like despair. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. Whatever else she was a mother watching her child suffer. "When can you test David and me?" she asked. "We can start the process today. The initial blood work will take a few hours, and we'll have preliminary compatibility results by tomorrow." After we left Dr. Henley's office, the walk back to Tyler's room was silent except for the sound of Miranda's heels clicking against the hospital floor. I felt like I was drowning in my own uselessness. The one thing I could have done to help Tyler, the one way I could have proven my worth to this family, and my own failing body had made it impossible. "Well," Miranda said as we reached Tyler's door, "I guess we know where you stand in this family now, don't we?" "Miranda," David warned, but she was just getting started. "All those years of you acting like you cared so much about Tyler, like you were this devoted grandmother. But when it really mattered, when he actually needed you, your body gave up on him just like you gave up on David when he was growing up." The comparison to David's childhood was like a dagger to my heart. I'd worked myself to the bone to provide for him after his father died, taking double shifts at the factory, missing school events because I couldn't afford to take time off. I thought I was being responsible, putting a roof over our heads and food on the table. But clearly, David had shared a different version of our history with his wife. "I never gave up on David," I said quietly. "Really? Then where were you when he had his appendectomy at 14? "Oh, that's right, working." "Where were you when he graduated valedictorian from high school?" "Working." "Where were you when he got his scholarship to college?" "At your second job." Each accusation was accurate and completely unfair at the same time. Yes, I'd been working during David's appendectomy, because someone had to pay the hospital bills. Yes, I'd missed his graduation ceremony, because I couldn't afford to take a day off without pay. But I'd been there in every way that mattered, or at least every way I could manage as a single mother with no support system. "That's different," I said. "I was trying to provide for him. And now you can't provide for Tyler when he needs you most. Some grandmother you are." David finally stepped in. "Miranda, that's enough. This isn't Mom's fault. The doctors explained why she can't donate." "Oh, so now you're defending her? Where was this loyalty when Tyler was getting sick and she was nowhere to be found?" "I was at the grocery store," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I was working so I could afford to live, so I could be available when Tyler needed me. I called every week. I asked to visit. You were always too busy." "Too busy? Or maybe I didn't want Tyler exposed to your negativity. Your constant complaining about money. Your dreary little apartment in that awful neighborhood." The mask was finally coming off. All these years, I'd suspected that Miranda looked down on me, but she'd always been polite enough to hide it. Now, with Tyler's life hanging in the balance, she was showing me exactly what she really thought. "Miranda, stop it," David said more firmly. "This isn't helping anyone." "You're right," she said, her voice suddenly calm again. "Nothing about your mother is helping anyone. She can't donate, she can't contribute financially to Tyler's care. And frankly, her constant hovering around here is just making everything more stressful." I felt like she'd physically pushed me. "Are you asking me to leave?" "I'm asking you to be realistic about what you can actually offer this family besides guilt and drama." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at David, hoping he would contradict his wife, tell her she was being unfair. Instead, he stared at the floor, his jaw tight with what I hoped was disapproval but might have been agreement. Tyler's weak voice came from behind us. "Grammy? Why is everyone yelling?" I turned to see him propped up on his pillows, looking smaller and more fragile than ever. His eyes were wide with confusion and fear, and I realized he'd been listening to our entire awful conversation. "Nobody's yelling, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "The grown-ups were just discussing your treatment. Are you going to give me your kidney, Grammy?" The innocent question hit me like a punch to the chest. How could I explain to a 10-year-old that his grandmother's body had failed him, that I couldn't save him even though I wanted to more than anything in the world? "The doctors say Grammy's not the right match, baby," I said gently. "But they're going to find you a perfect kidney from someone else." Tyler's face fell. "But I wanted yours, Grammy. Then I'd have a piece of you with me forever." Miranda made a disgusted sound from behind me, but I ignored her. I moved to Tyler's bedside and took his small hand in mine, not caring what anyone else thought. "Tyler, you already have pieces of me with you forever. Every story I've told you, every game we've played, every time I've told you how proud I am of you. Those are all pieces of my heart that live inside you. And they'll be there no matter what happens, okay?" He squeezed my hand with what little strength he had. "Okay, Grammy. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. More than all the stars in the sky." When I looked up, I saw David watching us with something that might have been regret. But Miranda's expression remained cold and unmoved. As visiting hours ended and I prepared to spend another night in the uncomfortable hospital chair, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong with this whole situation. Tyler's illness had come on so suddenly, progressed so quickly. And despite all of Miranda's accusations and demands, I noticed she hadn't volunteered to get tested for donation herself. She was so sure it was my responsibility, my obligation, my fault, but what about hers? Something wasn't adding up, and as I settled in for another sleepless night beside Tyler's bed, I promised myself I'd start asking the right questions. It was Friday afternoon, day 5 of our hospital vigil, when Tyler and I finally found ourselves alone together. Miranda had gone to the cafeteria for lunch, and David was meeting with the social worker about Tyler's ongoing care needs. The machines continued their steady rhythm, but Tyler seemed more alert than he'd been in days. "Grammy," he said softly, "can I tell you something?" I leaned closer to his bed, grateful for any sign that he was feeling better. "Of course, sweetheart. You can tell me anything." He looked toward the door nervously, as if checking to make sure we were really alone. "Promise you won't tell Mom?" A chill ran down my spine. What could a 10-year-old boy possibly need to hide from his mother, especially when he was this sick? "Tyler, if it's something important about your health, promise, Grammy. Please." There was something in his voice that I'd never heard before. Fear. Not the normal fear of a sick child, but something deeper, more complex. I nodded, though every instinct told me I might be making a mistake. "I promise." Tyler took a shaky breath. "Grammy, I don't think I got sick by accident." The words hung in the air between us like a physical presence. I felt my heart start to race, but I kept my voice calm and gentle. "What do you mean, honey? Mom's been giving me special vitamins. For like 6 months now. She said they would make me stronger, help me grow bigger like the other kids in my class." I frowned, trying to process this information. What kind of vitamins? Big white pills. They tasted awful, really bitter. And she had to crush them up in my juice because they were too big for me to swallow. She said they were expensive special vitamins that only smart moms knew about. My stomach began to churn. "Tyler, did your mom show these vitamins to your dad? Or to your doctor?" He shook his head quickly. "No, she said it was our secret. That dad wouldn't understand because he doesn't know as much about nutrition as she does. And she said doctors try to keep kids small, so they make more money treating them later." The explanation sounded like Miranda, confident, superior, and completely wrong. But what kind of vitamins would she be giving Tyler without medical supervision? "Tyler, how often were you taking these vitamins?" "Every morning with breakfast. 2 pills crushed up in my orange juice. Mom said I had to drink every drop, or they wouldn't work right. 2 large pills every day for 6 months. My mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. "Did you ever feel sick after taking them?" "Sometimes. My stomach would hurt and I'd get headaches. But Mom said that meant they were working, that my body was growing and changing. She said growing pains were normal." I felt sick to my stomach. This sweet, trusting child had been experiencing symptoms for months. And instead of seeking medical attention, Miranda had convinced him it was normal. "Tyler, when did you start feeling really sick? The way you felt before you came to the hospital?" He thought for a moment. "Maybe 3 weeks ago. I was really tired all the time and my back hurt. I couldn't eat very much because everything made me feel sick. But Mom said I was just having a growth spurt, and I needed to push through it." 3 weeks. He'd been in pain and declining for 3 weeks while Miranda convinced him it was normal. While she continued giving him these mysterious vitamins that were supposed to help him grow. "Grammy, I tried to tell Mom I didn't want to take the vitamins anymore, because they made me feel bad. But she got really mad and said I was being ungrateful. She said she was spending a lot of money to help me be healthy and strong, and I was being selfish by complaining." The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. Miranda had taken a sick child's natural instinct to resist what was making him feel worse, and turned it into a moral failing. "What did the vitamins look like, Tyler? Can you describe them?" "They were white and round but really big, bigger than quarters. And they had letters and numbers stamped on them. But I couldn't read what they said because Mom always crushed them up right away." Letters and numbers stamped on them. That didn't sound like vitamins at all. That sounded like prescription medication. "Tyler," I said carefully, "where did your mom keep these vitamins?" "In her bathroom cabinet, in a brown bottle with no label. She said the label fell off because they came from a special pharmacy. No label. A brown bottle. Large white pills with stamped markings. Everything about this story was setting off alarm bells in my head. Grammy, do you think the vitamins made me sick? The question was asked with such innocent trust that it broke my heart. This little boy was piecing together the same horrible possibility that was forming in my mind, but he needed me to help him make sense of it. Tyler, I think we need to tell the doctors about these vitamins. They need to know everything you've been taking so they can figure out how to make you better. His eyes widened with fear. But Mom said it was our secret. She said if I told anyone, they might take me away from her because people wouldn't understand that she was just trying to help me. Another layer of manipulation. Miranda had not only been giving Tyler potentially dangerous medication without medical supervision, but she'd also isolated him by making him complicit in keeping it secret. Tyler, listen to me very carefully. Good secrets are things like surprise birthday parties or Christmas presents. Bad secrets are things that might hurt you or make you sick. If someone asks you to keep a secret about something that's making you feel bad, that's not a good secret anymore. He nodded slowly, processing this new information. The doctors need to know about the vitamins so they can help you get better. And I'll be right here with you when we tell them, okay? I won't let anything bad happen to you. What if Mom gets in trouble? The question revealed so much about Tyler's relationship with his mother. Even sick and scared, his first concern was protecting the person who had potentially caused his illness. Tyler, your mom loves you very much. If she made a mistake, the important thing is making sure you get better. That's all any of us care about right now. It wasn't entirely true. I was furious at Miranda and what she might have done, but Tyler didn't need to carry that burden. Okay, Grammy. I'll tell the doctors about the vitamins. But will you stay with me? I'm scared. Of course I'll stay with you. I'm not going anywhere. Just then I heard Miranda's voice in the hallway, talking to someone on her phone. No, the grandmother turned out to be completely useless. Too old and sick to help. We're depending on David being a match now, but honestly I'm not optimistic. This whole family has bad genes. Tyler and I looked at each other, and I saw understanding dawn in his young eyes. He'd heard his mother dismiss me as useless, just as he'd heard her convince him to keep dangerous secrets. Grammy, he whispered. I'm ready to talk to the doctors now, before Mom comes back. I pressed the call button for the nurse, my hands trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. Whatever Miranda had been giving Tyler, whatever misguided attempt to help him grow had potentially destroyed his kidneys, the medical team needed to know immediately. As we waited for someone to respond, Tyler reached for my hand. Grammy, even if I get in trouble for keeping the secret, I'm glad I told you. It feels better not to have to pretend anymore. I squeezed his small hand gently. You're not in trouble, sweetheart. You're very brave for telling me. And you're right, secrets that hurt us should never be kept. The nurse appeared in the doorway just as Miranda's footsteps approached from the other direction. Tyler looked at me with determined eyes that reminded me so much of my late husband. I'm ready, he said. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like maybe finally we were going to get some real answers. The nurse, Sarah, was young but experienced enough to recognize the urgency in Tyler's voice when he said he needed to talk to a doctor immediately about something he'd been taking at home. Within minutes, Dr. Martinez, Tyler's nephrologist, was in the room with us, along with Dr. Henley. Tyler gripped my hand tightly as he began his story again, his voice stronger now that he'd made the decision to speak. He told them about the white pills, the bitter taste, the brown bottle with no label, the daily routine that had become normal until it made him too sick to continue. Dr. Martinez listened intently, occasionally asking gentle questions about timing, dosage, and symptoms. I watched his expression grow more serious with each detail Tyler provided. Tyler, you've been very brave to tell us this, Dr. Martinez said when my grandson finished. Can you tell me how you felt after taking these pills? Did you notice any changes in your body? My pee got really dark sometimes, Tyler said, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. And I was thirsty all the time, but drinking water made my stomach hurt. Mom said that was normal when you're growing. Dr. Martinez and Dr. Henley exchanged a look that sent ice through my veins. Tyler, we're going to run some special tests to see if we can figure out what these pills were, okay? It's going to help us treat you better. Just then Miranda's voice echoed from the hallway. I don't understand why you can't just put him higher on the donor list. He's 10 years old, for God's sake. She appeared in the doorway, still talking on her phone, and stopped short when she saw the doctors gathered around Tyler's bed. I'll call you back, she said into the phone, ending the call quickly. Is everything okay? Did something happen? Dr. Martinez stood up slowly. Mrs. Morrison, Tyler has been telling us about some medication he's been taking at home. We need to ask you some questions about it. The color drained from Miranda's face so quickly I thought she might faint. Medication? I don't know what you mean. Tyler doesn't take any medication at home. Mom, Tyler said softly, I told them about the vitamins. The white pills you put in my juice. Miranda's eyes darted from Tyler to the doctors to me, and I saw the exact moment when she realized her secret was out. Her carefully composed facade cracked, revealing something desperate and frightened underneath. Those weren't medication, she said quickly. They were vitamins. Supplements. Tyler's always been small for his age, and I was trying to help him grow. There's nothing wrong with giving your child vitamins. Mrs. Morrison, Dr. Henley said calmly. Tyler described pills that were quite large, with stamped letters and numbers, kept in an unlabeled brown bottle. That doesn't sound like standard vitamins. I don't know what he's talking about. He's been very sick, probably confused. Children imagine things when they're on so much medication. The casual dismissal of Tyler's account, the suggestion that he was lying or confused, ignited something fierce in my chest. This was my grandson, telling the truth about what had been done to him, and his own mother was calling him a liar. Tyler isn't confused, I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. He's telling us exactly what happened. Miranda spun toward me, her eyes blazing. This is your fault somehow, isn't it? You've been filling his head with ideas, making him think normal parenting is somehow wrong. Mrs. Morrison, Dr. Martinez interrupted before I could respond. We need to know exactly what Tyler was taking. His kidney failure could be the result of medication toxicity. If you were giving him something, anything, we need to know what it was immediately. I told you they were vitamins. Miranda's voice was getting higher, more desperate. I would never give my son anything that could hurt him. I'm a good mother. I've done everything right. Then help us prove that, Dr. Henley said. Let us examine the supplements you were giving him. If they were harmless vitamins, the tests will show that. Miranda's jaw tightened. I don't have them anymore. I threw them away when Tyler got sick because I thought maybe he was allergic to something in them. The lie was so obvious, so poorly constructed, that even Tyler looked confused by it. Mom, he said quietly, you didn't throw them away. I saw them in your bathroom yesterday when I was helping you pack your overnight bag. Tyler, stop it, Miranda snapped. You're sick and confused, and these doctors are putting ideas in your head. But Tyler had found his courage now, and he wasn't backing down. They're in the brown bottle behind your makeup box. The bottle that says, for veterinary use only on the bottom. The words hit the room like a bomb. Veterinary use only. Dr. Martinez stood up abruptly. Mrs. Morrison, were you giving your son animal medication? No. That's ridiculous. Tyler doesn't know what he's talking about. But the damage was done. Tyler's specific, detailed account versus Miranda's increasingly frantic denials painted a clear picture of what had been happening. Mrs. Morrison, Dr. Henley said in the calm, professional tone that somehow made everything more terrifying, I need to ask you directly. Were you giving Tyler any form of growth hormone, steroids, or other performance-enhancing substances? Performance-enhancing? I couldn't keep the shock out of my voice. Miranda, what were you giving him? Nothing. I was trying to help him. He was so much smaller than the other kids in his class. They were starting to pick on him, call him names. I just wanted him to be normal. The partial admission hung in the air. She'd been giving Tyler something to make him grow, something she'd obtained without a prescription, something she'd hidden from his father and his doctors. Mom, David's voice came from the doorway. He'd returned from his meeting and was staring at his wife with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of horror and disbelief. What's going on? I could hear you yelling from the hallway. Dr. Martinez turned to David. Your wife has been giving Tyler unlabeled medication without medical supervision. We believe it may be the cause of his kidney failure. David's face went white. That's not possible. Miranda would never. He stopped, looking at his son's determined expression, at the doctor's serious faces, at Miranda's guilty panic. David, you have to believe me, Miranda pleaded. I was just trying to help Tyler. The other mothers in his class were all talking about growth supplements. I did research online. I found something that was supposed to be safe and natural. Veterinary growth hormone is neither safe nor natural for human children, Dr. Henley said bluntly. It can cause severe kidney damage, liver problems, and a host of other complications. Veterinary. David's voice was barely a whisper. Miranda, you gave our son animal drugs? They're the same compounds used in human treatments. Miranda was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Just less expensive and easier to get. I thought if I gave him a smaller dose, monitored him carefully. You poisoned him, David said, the words coming out like he couldn't quite believe he was saying them. You poisoned our son. I was trying to help him. He was being bullied. He was unhappy. I wanted him to be confident and strong. So you destroyed his kidneys instead, I said, unable to keep quiet any longer. You gave him veterinary drugs and then spent a week blaming me for his illness. You called me useless, told me this was my genetic fault, demanded that I risk my life to donate my kidney, all while knowing that you were the one who made him sick. Miranda turned on me with desperate fury. This is your fault. If you hadn't failed David so completely as a mother, if you'd raised a son who could provide for his family properly, I wouldn't have been so worried about Tyler's future. I wouldn't have felt like I needed to give him every possible advantage. The accusation was so twisted, so far removed from reality, that for a moment I couldn't even respond. She was blaming me for her decision to give Tyler veterinary growth hormones. Miranda, David said quietly, stop. Just stop. But she couldn't stop. The dam had burst, and years of resentment and justification came pouring out. You all act like I'm some kind of monster, but I'm the only one who is thinking about Tyler's future. You think it's easy being a mother these days? You think it's easy watching your child struggle, while other parents do everything they can to give their kids advantages? I was trying to level the playing field. By poisoning him, Tyler said, his voice small but clear. Miranda looked at her son as if seeing him for the first time. The child she'd been trying to help, lying in a hospital bed with failing kidneys because of her actions. Tyler, baby, I never meant for you to get hurt. I love you so much. I just wanted you to be happy and successful and… You made me sick, Mom, Tyler said simply. And then you tried to make Grammy give up her kidney because you said it was her fault. The truth of it, spoken in a child's clear, honest voice, was devastating. Miranda's face crumpled completely, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she did something that destroyed any sympathy I might have had. She fainted. Not a gentle swoon or a gradual collapse, but a dramatic fall that sent David rushing to catch her, that brought nurses running, that successfully shifted all attention away from Tyler and onto her. Even in crisis, even caught in the worst mistake of her life, Miranda had found a way to make herself the victim. But as the medical staff fussed over her, as David held her unconscious form, Tyler looked at me with eyes that were older and wiser than any 10-year-old should have. Grammy, he whispered. I'm glad I told the truth. So am I, sweetheart, I said, squeezing his hand. So am I. 3 months later, I sat in the sunny breakfast nook of my new apartment, watching Tyler carefully measure ingredients for pancakes. His movements were still deliberate, mindful of the recovery process, but the spark was back in his eyes. The pale, sickly child from the hospital had transformed back into the energetic boy I remembered, though with a maturity that broke my heart and filled me with pride in equal measure. Grammy, do you think 2 teaspoons of vanilla is too much? He asked, holding up the measuring spoon with scientific precision. I think it's perfect, sweetheart. Your pancakes are already better than mine. He grinned, the same mischievous smile that had lit up my world for 10 years. That's because I actually measure things instead of just dumping stuff in the bowl like you do. I laughed, remembering all the cooking disasters we'd shared over the years. This kitchen, bright and clean and entirely ours, felt like a miracle every morning when I woke up. The custody hearing had been swift once the medical evidence was presented. Miranda's lawyer had tried to argue that she'd made a mistake born of love and concern, but the prosecutor had been relentless. Veterinary growth hormones. 6 months of systematic poisoning. A child's kidney function destroyed by his mother's ambition and vanity. David had filed for divorce immediately after Miranda's arrest. The man I'd raised, who I'd sometimes thought was lost to his wife's influence, had shown up in ways that surprised everyone, including himself. He'd fought for Tyler, gotten him the best medical care, and made the decision that Tyler would live with me during his recovery. "I need to make things right, Mom," he'd told me the day Tyler was discharged from the hospital. "I should have seen what Miranda was doing. I should have protected him. And I should have protected you from her too." The conversation had been long overdue, filled with tears and apologies and honest admissions about how we'd both failed each other over the years. David had been angry at me for missing parts of his childhood, but he'd also been angry at himself for not understanding why I'd been absent. We'd both been carrying resentments that had festered in silence. "Dad's picking me up at 10 for my checkup appointment," Tyler said, expertly flipping a pancake. "He wants to know if you want to come with us." I considered it. David and I had been rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully. He visited regularly, called to check on Tyler's progress, and had even helped me move into this larger apartment when Tyler's temporary custody became permanent. But medical appointments still felt like treacherous territory, filled with too many memories of those horrible days when Miranda was blaming me for Tyler's illness. "I think I'll let you have some father-son time," I said. "But tell him I want a full report on what Dr. Martinez says." Tyler nodded seriously. At 10 years old, he understood the importance of his medical care in ways that most children never had to. The growth hormones had damaged his kidneys severely, but not irreversibly. With proper treatment, careful monitoring, and time, his kidney function was slowly improving. He'd avoided the transplant that had seemed inevitable just months ago. The doorbell rang and Tyler looked up from the stove. "That's probably Dad. He's early." But when I opened the door, I found someone I hadn't expected to see again. Miranda stood in the hallway, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. She'd lost weight during her 3 months in jail, and her once perfect appearance had been replaced by something that looked almost human. "Hazel," she said quietly, "may I come in?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, to protect Tyler from any more of her manipulation. But another part of me, the part that had been working on forgiveness and healing, was curious about what she had to say. "Tyler's here," I said finally. "I know. I was hoping to see him. And to talk to both of you." Tyler appeared in the kitchen doorway, spatula still in hand. When he saw his mother, his expression didn't change. No fear, no excitement, just a calm assessment that was heartbreaking in its maturity. "Hi, Mom," he said simply. Miranda's composure cracked immediately. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she took in the sight of her son, healthy and cooking breakfast in my kitchen. "Tyler, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did to you." Tyler set down the spatula and walked over to us, but he didn't run into his mother's arms the way she clearly hoped he would. Instead, he stood beside me, close enough that I could put a protective hand on his shoulder. "I know you're sorry, Mom," he said. "Dr. Peterson helped me understand that you were sick too, just in a different way than I was." Dr. Peterson was Tyler's therapist, a kind woman who'd been helping him process the trauma of discovering that his mother had been slowly poisoning him, while convincing him it was for his own good. Miranda looked between Tyler and me, seeming to understand that the dynamics had shifted permanently. She was no longer the center of Tyler's world, no longer the authority figure who controlled every interaction. "I've been getting help," she said. "In jail and now in outpatient treatment. They've diagnosed me with something called achievement by proxy syndrome. I was trying to live out my own failed ambitions through Tyler." The clinical explanation felt inadequate for the magnitude of what she'd done, but I could see that admitting to mental illness was difficult for someone who'd spent years presenting herself as the perfect mother. "Tyler," she continued, "I need you to know that what I did wasn't your fault. You were perfect exactly the way you were. I was the one who was broken, who couldn't see how wonderful you already were." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "Dr. Peterson told me that too. She said sometimes grown-ups make mistakes because they have hurt feelings inside that they don't know how to fix. That's exactly right, Miranda said, kneeling down to Tyler's eye level. I had hurt feelings from when I was little, and instead of getting help for them, I tried to make you into someone who would make me feel better. That was wrong and selfish. Are you going to try to take me away from Grammy? Tyler asked directly. The question surprised Miranda. Do you want to stay with Grammy? Yes. She takes care of me the right way. She doesn't try to change me or make me into something I'm not. Miranda looked up at me then, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before, genuine respect. You're a good grandmother, Hazel. Better than I ever gave you credit for. And you were right about everything. I was manipulative, cruel, and wrong. The admission should have felt like victory, but mostly it just felt sad. All those years of conflict, all that pain, and it had taken nearly losing Tyler for Miranda to see what had been obvious to everyone else. I'm not going to fight for custody, she said. Tyler is thriving with you in ways he never did with me. But I'm hoping eventually, when I've proven that I'm really better, that maybe I could visit sometimes. Be part of his life in a healthier way. Tyler looked up at me questioningly. The decision was ultimately mine, but he deserved to have input. What do you think, Tyler? I asked. He was quiet for a long moment, considering. I think maybe someday when you're really better, Mom. But not yet. I need more time to trust you again. Miranda nodded, tears streaming freely now. That's fair. That's more than fair. I'll wait as long as it takes. She stood up slowly. There's one more thing I need to say to you, Hazel. That day in the hospital when I blamed you for Tyler's illness, when I called you useless and demanded that you donate your kidney, I knew it wasn't your fault. I knew exactly what was causing his kidney failure, and I let you believe you were responsible. That was unforgivable. The admission hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd suspected it. Hearing her confirm that she'd knowingly let me carry that guilt, that she'd been willing to let me undergo dangerous surgery to cover up her own actions, was devastating. Why? I asked. Why would you do that to me? To Tyler? Because I was terrified, she said simply. I knew I'd made a terrible mistake, and I thought if I could shift the blame to your genetics, to your failure as a mother, maybe I could avoid the consequences. It was cowardly and cruel. Tyler had been listening to this entire exchange with the serious attention of a child who'd learned not to trust the adults around him completely. Mom, he said quietly, when you were giving me those pills and I told you they made me feel sick, you got mad at me. You said I was being ungrateful. I know, baby. I was wrong about that too. Your body was trying to tell you that something was hurting you. And instead of listening, I made you feel bad for speaking up. Dr. Peterson says I should always trust my body when it tells me something is wrong. Dr. Peterson is absolutely right. Promise me you'll never let anyone make you doubt what your body is telling you. Not even me. Tyler nodded solemnly. I promise. The conversation felt like it was winding down, but Miranda seemed reluctant to leave. She looked around my apartment, taking in the cheerful yellow walls, the plants on the windowsill, the photos of Tyler and me scattered throughout the living room. He looks happy here, she said. He is happy, I replied. We both are. I'm glad. I'm truly glad. She moved toward the door, then turned back. Hazel, I know I have no right to ask this, but when you think about me, try to remember that I did love Tyler. I just loved him wrong. After she left, Tyler and I stood in the quiet kitchen, the pancakes forgotten on the stove. Are you okay, sweetheart? I asked. He nodded thoughtfully. I think so. It was good to see that she's sorry. But I'm not ready to trust her yet. That's very wise. Trust is something that has to be earned back slowly. Grammy, do you think she'll really get better? I considered the question carefully. I think she wants to get better, and that's a good start. But changing the way we think and act is hard work, and it takes a long time. Tyler picked up the spatula and returned to the stove, checking on our breakfast. Grammy, I'm glad I live with you now. You make me feel safe. You make me feel safe too, Tyler. Safer and happier than I've been in years. As we sat down to eat our slightly overcooked pancakes, I reflected on how much our lives had changed. 3 months ago, I'd been a useless grandmother, dismissed and blamed, carrying guilt for things that weren't my fault. Now I was Tyler's guardian, his advocate, his safe harbor. The custody arrangement was still temporary. pending the outcome of Miranda's treatment and David's ability to provide stable housing for Tyler. But Dr. Martinez had recommended that Tyler remain with me for at least another 6 months, citing the stability and improvement in his health since leaving his mother's care. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt truly needed and valued. Not as a source of money or labor, but as a person whose presence made someone else's life better. Tyler chattered about his plans for the day, his upcoming school project, his excitement about his improving kidney function. His voice filled the sunny apartment with life and hope. This wasn't the ending I'd expected when I'd rushed to the hospital 3 months ago, terrified and guilty and ready to sacrifice everything for my grandson's health. But it was better than anything I could have imagined. Tyler was safe, healthy, and home. And for the first time in my life, home wasn't a place I was barely hanging on to. It was a place where I belonged, where I was appreciated, where love wasn't conditional on what I could provide. At 63, I'd finally learned what it felt like to be truly needed for exactly who I was. And it was worth every moment of pain it had taken to get here.